You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is March 9th, 2025, and this is episode 310 of Lighthearted. My co-host today is Averie Shaughnessy-Comfort, Executive Director of Lake Erie Lights of Pennsylvania. Hi, Averie.
Hello, Jeremy.
In a few minutes, we'll hear a conversation about Barcelona Lighthouse on Lake Erie in New York. According to Google Maps, Barcelona Lighthouse is just a little more than a half hour, I believe, about a half-hour drive from where you are in Erie, Pennsylvania, Averie. Is that right?
That's correct. So it is our closest lighthouse neighbor by mileage. It's just 28 miles from the Erie Land Lighthouse. It's about just a little over a 30-minute drive to get there on PA Route 5, which then becomes New York 5. It's a gorgeous scenic drive along Lake Erie with really stunning views of the lake, fabulous wineries, beaches, and cute little towns.
So our guest will be Marla Bingham-Melcher, the park manager for Barcelona Lighthouse and some other state parks in that vicinity. Do you know Marla?
I do not personally, but I think both of us know of each other. We do have a mutual connection with our friends at the Erie Maritime Museum. Both have been critical in helping us find information about both of our lighthouses and about maritime history on Lake Erie. So I think it's about time I give Marla a call.
So, Averie, there's some exciting stuff happening at Barcelona Lighthouse, and you'll hear more about it in our interview. You've actually reported on their projects there on this podcast, Averie.
Yes, I have. Many of our visitors either go to or from the Land Lighthouse to Barcelona or vice versa, or they make their way to Presque Isle. So we always try to check up to see what's happening, make sure they're open. You know, they're one of the passport stamp sites, so we always make sure to direct people that way and say, hey, if you're heading to Niagara Falls, make sure you stop by Barcelona Lighthouse. So I always make sure I try to include it anytime I report any news in the area, too.
Your organization takes care of 3 lighthouses around Erie. I'm wondering if you might like to share an update with our listeners about what's happening there.
Sure. So not too much happening with our North Pier Light at the moment. We're kind of still waiting on the final process through the federal government to receive it. But the North Pier itself, which leads up to the lighthouse, is getting quite a few cosmetic updates this year, which will enhance the experience for visitors coming up to taking pictures of, walking up to the North Pier Light, which will really, really be a huge help on that side of Presque Isle State Park. So that portion, for those of you who haven't been to Presque Isle State Park, it kind of juts out into Lake Erie at the entrance of the Port of Erie. So it's going to be a major facelift, which will be much, much needed. The Land Lighthouse is receiving a fresh coat of paint on our observation deck in the spring. We just had new masonry joints this past summer. We've had the tree line trimmed so you get great views of Lake Erie. We've expanded programming. We're partnering with our local Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, starting up a program that's called Presque Isle from a Distance. So talking about the items that you can see from the top of the Land Lighthouse, which will be really interesting. And we're also partnering with our local children's museum, and then we're continuing our partnership with the public library to expand our programming throughout the summer. Presque Isle Lighthouse will be seeking bids for work on the foundation to the tower. This is going to be pretty critical work. We're also having some windows reglazed and repaired as we speak, and we'll be hosting some special events this year to commemorate our 10th year as an organization, which is hard to believe, but very exciting.
Congratulations on that 10th anniversary. That's great.
Thank you.
By the way, I'm really hoping I might get to visit your area in September. I'll be attending the Maritime Heritage Conference in Buffalo, New York, September 24th to 27th. As a matter of fact, I'll be doing a presentation at the conference about doing a lighthouse podcast, strangely enough. After the conference, I plan to drive west along the south shore of Lake Erie to visit a few lighthouses like Dunkirk and Barcelona and New York. And, of course, I plan to stop in Erie to see your lighthouses and to meet you in person.
I think that's a fabulous plan, and you're going to hit quite a few lighthouses. And of course, I'll be thrilled to actually meet you in person and show you what makes Erie the heart of Pennsylvania's maritime heritage.
Before we get to today's interview, I also want to remind our listeners about a special virtual event that's coming up very soon.
Yes, the U.S. Lighthouse Society will be hosting a virtual conference from March 25th to 27th to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the National Historic Lighthouse Preservation Act, or better known as NHLPA. The The event is in collaboration with personnel from the Coast Guard, National Park Service, and the General Services Administration.
NHLPA lighthouse owners and federal and state agencies will share success stories, challenges, and lessons learned. Advance registration is required for participation in the conference. For more information, visit the USLHS website at uslhs.org. The deadline for registration is March 15th, so people have 6 days to register. It looks like it'll be a fun and informative virtual conference. Will you be attending, Averie?
I will be attending. We have so many projects in the works, so I'm always curious about what these successes, challenges, lessons learned are at other lighthouses. We'll have a lot going on, as I'm sure many of our listeners can also, they probably feel the same. We always have something going on at our lighthouses, so the more we learn, the better.
I plan to attend, and several of my friends will be among the presenters, including some who have been on this podcast. Bob Trapani, Executive Director of the American Lighthouse Foundation, Dave Waller, the owner of Graves Light in Boston Harbor, and Tim Petty, owner of Green's Ledge Light on Long Island Sound, or people our listeners might be familiar with. They've been on the podcast. The whole list of presenters is on the website at uslhs.org. I'm very much looking forward to it. And again, the deadline for registration is March 15th.
Hope to see you there.
Let's get to today's interview, Averie. Please help me introduce our guest.
Sure, Jeremy. In 1828, Congress appropriated $5,000 to construct a lighthouse at the harbor of the town of Westfield on Lake Erie in New York. The local names can be a little confusing. The harbor was known as Portland Harbor until 1823, when the town of Westfield was established, and the name was changed to Barcelona Harbor. The lighthouse went into service in 1829, and it was sometimes referred to as Portland Harbor Light.
I think I follow that, but I hope there won't be a quiz. The harbor had just been designated an official port of entry when the lighthouse was built. In the early 1800s, lumber, salt, flour, and fish were shipped to and from the port.
The lighthouse is a conical stone tower, 40 feet tall, and there was an attached keeper's cottage. The first keeper was Joshua Lane, who was described as a deaf clergyman. One of the most notable things about Barcelona Lighthouse is that it is believed to be the very first natural gas-powered lighthouse in the world. It's also said to be the first public building in the United States to be powered by natural gas.
The light was discontinued as an aid to navigation in 1859 for reasons I discussed with our guest. It went through several owners before it was transferred to New York State Parks in 2007. It's not an official aid to navigation, but there's still a natural gas-powered light in the lighthouse. There's a museum in the keeper's house, and right now there's a major project happening that includes the rehabilitation of the lighthouse tower.
Today's guest is Marla Bingham-Melcher. Marla is the manager of the 5 state parks in Chautauqua County in New York, including Barcelona Lighthouse.
It was a pleasure speaking with Marla about the history and the current restoration project at Barcelona Lighthouse. Let's listen to that conversation now. I am speaking today with Marla Bingham-Melcher, who is the park manager for Barcelona Lighthouse on Lake Erie in the town of Westfield, New York. I think I have that right. Thank you so much for joining me today, Marla. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
And am I correct when I say the lighthouse is in the town of Westfield? Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. And kind of maybe an hour kind of southwest of Buffalo. Would that be about approximately right?
A good hour, yes. A heavy hour.
Depending on the traffic, yeah. So let me ask you, you are the park manager for the lighthouse, but do your responsibilities as a state park manager actually go beyond the lighthouse?
Yes, they do. I actually am responsible for 5 state parks in Chautauqua County. We've got 3 of them on Lake Erie itself and 2 of them on Chautauqua Lake. On Chautauqua Lake, there's Long Point and Midway State Park. And then on Lake Erie, we've got Lake Erie State Park, Sunset Bay State Park, and, of course, the Lighthouse.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure they're all beautiful properties. Midway State Park is kind of intriguing. It was a historic amusement park. Is that right?
That is correct. It is the 5th oldest trolley park in the nation. It was built in 1898.
Cool. Is it pretty much a natural park now with no remnants of the amusement park?
Oh, no. We have historic amusement rides running. That is my most expensive park. Because we're trying to keep all the 40s and 50s rides operational.
Oh, neat. I probably should know about that, but now next time I'm in the area. In fact, I'm going to a maritime conference later this year in Buffalo, so maybe I'll make it down that way, I hope.
We'd love to have you stop.
I would love to do that. Thank you. So let's just get into a little bit into the history of the lighthouse. First of all, when it was first built, I believe it was known as Portland Harbor Lighthouse. The harbor there
Yes.
is known as Portland Harbor. Not to confuse listeners, nothing to do with Portland, Maine, or Portland, Oregon, of course. But it's Portland Harbor. But where does the name Barcelona come from?
Well, there was a gentleman, Isaac Smith, who suggested the name for Barcelona. It was Portland at the time, but he had traveled to Spain and really fell in love with the harbor there and felt that it was almost a sister harbor, looked the same. So he suggested renaming it Barcelona. And at that point in time, there was other things going on in history. Spain was having a major civil war, and a lot of folks in this area were from the Spanish area. So other towns and villages also renamed themselves. Mena, Villanova, that are all also in our area. So it wasn't uncommon to rename something.
Interesting. Okay. So the lighthouse was first built in 1829. Why was a lighthouse needed there at that time?
Well, it was a major port. In 1827, Portland was declared a port of entry because of the large volume of shipping and commerce, everything that was happening there at the time. The Erie Canal had opened in 1825. The federal government was realizing that, oh, wow, we have a lot of commerce going on here. So it was such a major port, they said, we need a lighthouse.
There's an interesting aspect to the history of Barcelona Lighthouse. I was reading a real distinction it has to do with the way the light was powered in the early days. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. Initially, it was oil, but the goal was to make it natural gas. There was a lot of natural gas deposits in this area. William Hart in Fredonia was the first one to start really experimenting, and he actually tried to light the Dunkirk lighthouse, but it didn't work. Then another fellow, Thomas Campbell, came in. He was the one actually building the Barcelona Lighthouse. And his buddy Charles Tupper, they decided, hey, you know what? There's a creek nearby that has natural gas. They worked with Mr. Hart. They got it all constructed for a reservoir to capture that gas. And they piped it up about a mile to the Barcelona Lighthouse and lit it with natural gas in wooden pipes.
Interesting. Wow.
Yep.
I think some experimenting was done that in other places, but I think it was pretty rare. Do you know if it was lit for very long with natural gas?
It was lit pretty much the rest of its life there, the 30 years that it was open. Yep. Occasionally they had to switch back and forth if they had condensation forming in the pipes. Then they would have to turn off the gas, get those blown out, and then switch back again.
Very interesting. So as you just mentioned, you said about 30 years it was active. That's a fairly short life for an active aids and navigation for a lighthouse. So why was it discontinued in 1859?
Two main reasons, weather and progress. So the railroads started coming through. I mean, prior to this, we only had, dirt paths and the water for shipping things. So the railroads started coming through the area, and there were a few major storms that really damaged the wharves and the break wall at Barcelona. They started rebuilding the structures, but it was kind of left undone because they kind of deemed the port defunct. There was a canal that was put through in Erie, Pennsylvania. Erie kind of became what this harbor should have been, really. Yeah. Erie put a canal down. The big distinction here with this harbor was it connected Lake Erie and the Great Lakes Basin to the Mississippi Basin. They would unload all the cargo in Portland Harbor here, go down the Portland Trail to the top of Lake Chautauqua in Mayville, and they would load up all the boats there, and all of a sudden you are in the Great Lakes Basin and navigable waters. So this was the big connection here until the railroads came through.
I understand after its active days, the lighthouse property had a number of different uses before New York State Parks acquired it. Can you tell me about those uses over the years?
Sure. I mean, initially there were some farmers that rented it and used the grounds. They didn't actually stay in the place, but farming was happening. In 1872, George Patterson wanted the thing sold. He was the local land agent. He worked for the Holland Land Company. And when they put it up for sale, he had a third party bid on it for him. So he actually bought it for $101. Then his family stayed there as a summer cottage and retreat for generations, generations and generations. They were there for a long time. They also leased the property occasionally. There was a roadside stand and cafe at one point, several other little things going on. And then in the late, I think it was late 70s, Faye Scott, who was the last great-granddaughter of George Patterson, she made her residence there. She was the final person that was in the Patterson family living there.
Mm-hmm.
After her, it was sold to another family that lived there for a short period, and then the state acquired it as a historic site in 2007.
Has more property been added onto that since then?
Yes. Actually, we purchased the property that's on the lower shoreline on the edge of the harbor in 2019, adding to the property itself.
How large is the property in all? Do you know?
It's almost 3 acres now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's pretty good size for a light station.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a light in the lighthouse today? I know it's not officially an active aid to navigation, but there is some. Is there some sort of light in there?
Yes. With the exception of the recent rehabilitation work we were doing, the current light has been in the tower since 1962. It's a gas-powered lamp that doesn't have any lenses, not used for navigational purposes, like you mentioned. It basically looks like an old street lamp that's up there, and it's still lit with natural gas.
Wow. Is it still really old equipment to produce the natural gas?
No, in fact, it was even more modernized with this project that we've been working on this year. So we're currently meeting codes and everything with the natural gas. Up until this year, it was the 1962 technology.
Oh, that's neat. And is the light lit like for special occasions, that sort of thing?
It's lit 24/7, 365.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep.
I didn't realize that.
Yep, absolutely. Wow. If it starts to get a little dim, somebody gives us a call and says, hey, and we go up and change the mantles in it and keep it going.
Does it serve any navigational purpose for local boaters, that kind of thing, or is it pretty much for show, do you think?
It's pretty much for show. I mean, you can see it out in the water, not real far, but we're a standard traditional harbor now. We've got our own navigational lights at the harbor entrance and such, so those are the keys for the boaters.
Yeah. My wife always says a lighthouse without a light is like it has no soul, So a lighthouse should have a light, so I'm glad it does.
Most of our older pictures show it without. So
yeah.
It was the 1962 project when it was still in the Patterson's hands. They did that.
Yeah, I believe I've seen those pictures with no light in it. Mm-hmm. So the keeper's house is still there. How is that used today?
Well, my office is upstairs in there.
Okay.
Also, the keeper's cottage houses our museum. We've got a whole bunch of things in there. It used to have our gift shop in it until right now. We're in the process of moving it out to what was the old garage structure that got renovated as part of the current project. It's also acted as our local visitor center under an agreement with the town of Westfield in recent years. So when you come in, there's brochures and things like that for local things as well.
Now, I know the lighthouse, and I assume the keeper's house as well, are currently closed because of some work that's going on. But is normally the public can come and get inside the house, see the museum, and in the lighthouse tower as well? Is that correct?
Yeah. We've traditionally had the museum and cottage open Memorial Day weekend through Labor Day and then weekends till Christmas. The lighthouse tower itself, until now, we've just been able to open the base and let people kind of go in the bottom and look up and see why they can't go up or couldn't go up. But with the renovations, we're intending to have it open so people can ascend this year.
What kind of stairs does it have?
They're wooden stairs. It's a spiral. Yep, it's a wooden off of one center beam all the way up.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then the other end of the stairs are mortared into the walls, actually. That was part of the main problem redoing them.
I asked because a lot of early lighthouses from that era have stone stairs. But do you know if the wooden stairs are original to the tower?
They were. There'd been some patchwork doing over the years, but the center beam was very original, and we've had to do a little bit of work at the top of the beam because there was a little bit of rot in it. Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of repairs and things like that, there is a current restoration project. I think it's a pretty big project. Can you tell me the basics of that?
Absolutely. The project actually has several phases, and we just finished phase one. Phase one included the tower restoration, which was replacing all the stairs, redoing all of the mortar inside and out, putting a new roof on it, a new hatch, new railings, a new gas line for the light. So it was really redoing the tower so that everybody could be in there and be safe. And we also converted the little garage on site for the gift shop that I said was moving out there and some public restrooms. We did not have any public restrooms available until now.
Are there concerns about erosion there?
Yep.
And if so, what's being done about that?
Well, when we first started, one of our engineers said, "Oh, stop everything. The thing's going to fall over," because it's actually about 20 feet from the edge of the cliff.
Hmm.
So part of the next phase that we're starting here in the spring is the slope stabilization. They're going to redo the whole slope line in front of the cottage and the lighthouse, and they're going to add trails that are going to connect the upper area where the lighthouse and cottage are to the lower area of the shoreline that I mentioned that we bought. Down on that shoreline, there's a cottage that was an old fisherman's cottage that we're going to rehab and make that into an interpretive site for commercial fishing in the harbor. So that's what was really going on through the mid-century of the last century, the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're also receiving a fishing tug to help tell that story. So that's a full-size, previously operational fishing tug that will be put onto the property. So there'll be a lot of things going on to be able to reasons to connect the upper and lower pieces so people can have the whole site.
Well, those sound like great additions to the place. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when is all this work going to be completed?
Well, the first phase is done. We're done with that. They're doing some final little touch-ups on the stairs with some cement, but that's it. The next phases we're planning to bring here in the spring. April, May, they'll start on the slope stabilization. The big idea is to have everything done before 2029, which is the 200-year anniversary of the lighthouse.
Uh-huh. I know it's, 4 years away, and it seems like a long time, but it's going to go by fast. You're already starting to plan a celebration for that year?
We've started talking about it. We will have a ribbon cutting this spring for the first phase, for opening the tower to the public.
When all this work is completed, is it going to have much of an effect? Like, will the experience of visitors change because of this?
Oh, immensely. Initially, when we opened this to the public in 2015, we had hardly anything in the museum. We didn't open the tower at all. It was just such a tight little "why am I here" site. Now you can go into the tower, and with the phase being completed, we're going to actually let people go to the top so they can climb the stairs, go through the hatch, look out, see the gas lamp up there, and get the view. That's the one thing that every visitor always says, "Well, when can we go to the top?" This year. So
yeah,
that's
great.
the big thing.
Yeah.
And as we've expanded the museum and we add the fisherman's cottage and everything down below, there's just going to be so much more to see and do on this site.
Yeah.
We've hired a historian that is researching a lot of things. We've just been gathering and trying to make it an amazing place to visit for everybody.
Tell me again, when is that cottage and tug going to be there for the public to see?
That should be in phase 3. So this next year should be phase 2. The year after, hopefully, should be phase 3.
Mm-hmm.
So by the end of 2026, the beginning of 2027, we should have that in place. That's the plan.
Yeah. Reason I asked is that I might be able to make it there in this coming September when I'm going to Buffalo. So I'll have to go back again in another year or two to see the rest of the work after it's done.
Absolutely.
So as I think you know, this is the official podcast of the U.S. Lighthouse Society, and one of the most popular things the society does is the passport program, and people are pretty fanatical about getting lighthouse stamps in their passports.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. Do you have a passport stamp at the Barcelona Lighthouse?
We do. In fact, there are actually 2 unique stamps available. One that we have that we had made when we opened in 2015, and one that exists at the Dunkirk Lighthouse a few miles up the road. The Dunkirk one was put in place while Barcelona was still in private hands, so that your participants could get a stamp from somewhere. But we created a separate, very distinct stamp in 2016.
Cool, and I'll bet you get a lot of visitors asking for the stamps.
We do. We sell the books there. If they haven't heard of the program, we share it with them and give them contact information for you all.
Excellent. Love to hear it. So is the Lighthouse staffed by volunteers? Two-part question. Is it staffed by volunteers, and are you always looking for new volunteers?
Well, we've had volunteers in the past that were very specifically associated with the town of Westfield's Visitor Center. Currently, we primarily have paid staff, both some full-time and seasonal staff that come on. We're going to be hiring a lot of seasonal staff this year with the additional things that we're allowing people to do. We do welcome volunteers. I'm happy to have volunteers if they don't want to actually get paid, but we'll pay you.
Okay. Well, I hope, you never know who might be listening. I hope listeners in your
Absolutely.
general area might be interested in possibly applying for a position or
Hmm.
volunteering. Yeah, that's great. I know it is a state park, of course,
Yes.
but can people donate to the preservation of Barcelona Lighthouse?
Yes. The New York State Parks Agency has a partner, the Natural Heritage Trust. It is a 501c3 organization whose mission includes fundraising specifically for New York State Parks projects. Donations that you give to them can only be utilized towards whatever the donor indicates, and they are tax deductible this way. So you can actually make a direct donation to the naturalheritagetrust.org,
Hmm.
and you go to the parks and you just choose Barcelona Lighthouse under the Allegheny region, and you can make a donation.
Good, great. And we'll repeat that before this podcast episode is over, too.
Okay.
Uh, so I have two final questions for you, okay? And these are for bonus points, okay?
Okay.
So get your number two pencil sharpened. Why do you think Barcelona Lighthouse needs to be preserved?
Well, it really tells the story of early commerce in the area, the evolution of a region in spite of exterior forces, the weather and everything. It's a long-standing icon in the area. It's even the town of Westville's logo.
Mm,
It inspires artists, it excites our travelers that come through. The community really, this is the community. The lighthouse is their main big thing here.
yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. I'm not surprised to hear that. In many places, lighthouses tend to be kind of centerpieces of communities. Often they're the oldest structures in the
Hmm.
communities, and and to use it in the town logo is not unusual either. So, nice to hear all that. So, final question for bonus points is: what is your favorite part of your association with Barcelona Lighthouse?
That I got to have a hand in preserving it. When we're done, I really do hope it lasts another 200 years before they have to do this kind of project again. I
Yeah,
just like being part of it.
absolutely. Well, it sounds like you and state parks are being great stewards, and this is exciting, all that's happening there. And as I said, I hope to visit maybe this coming fall and see how things are progressing. But it's all very interesting. This is a lighthouse that's been a little bit off my path so far, but I hope to change that, and hope some of our listeners will make it there as well. And Marla, I really appreciate your time today, and let's stay in touch. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and let me know when you come through. We'll get you a personal tour.
For more on Barcelona Lighthouse, go to New York State Parks website at parks.ny.gov/parks/Barcelona Lighthouse. Or you can just Google Barcelona Lighthouse. On the page for the lighthouse, there is a link to the New York State Heritage Trust page where you can donate to help preserve the lighthouse.
Again, I enjoyed speaking with Marla. I hope I can visit there in September. Let's shift gears back to your lighthouses, Averie. I understand you have some news concerning a find related to one of your keepers in Erie.
Yes, so for a couple of years, we've been searching for our longest serving keeper. We've recently located him, Mr. Andrew Shaw and Mrs. Mary Shaw in Girard, Pennsylvania. So in August, likely on National Lighthouse Day, we're going to do a ceremony. We also have a grave marker ready to go, and we're going to do a short service to commemorate his time at the Presque Isle Lighthouse as a keeper. He served for 26 years for us.
Speaking of things like that, I'm involved in an effort to have a lighthouse service marker placed on the grave of Ida Lewis in Newport, Rhode Island. I'm sure many of our listeners know who Ida was. She lived at Lime Rock in Newport Harbor from the mid-1850s until her death in 1911. She saved at least 18 people from drowning, and she became one of the most famous lighthouse keepers in history. I've been working with my friend John Lopez of the Coast Guard Auxiliary and Lenore Scommel, who wrote a biography of Ida Lewis. We're also working with the Newport Historical Society, and the U.S. Lighthouse Society will be a co-sponsor. We'll have a ceremony at Ida's grave in Newport on May 24th, which is the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend. We'll be making an official announcement very soon, and I'll mention it again on the podcast when we firm everything up. I was amazed to find out that nobody had already done this for Ida Lewis.
So you're really commemorating quite a woman in lighthouse history. I love that one of the most famous keepers is a woman. The Erie Land Lighthouse here had two female light keepers as well, so celebrating their contributions to lighthouse history is critical.
Before we sign off for today, I wanted to ask you a question, Averie. It's something I'm always asking myself. I try really hard not to get into politics in this podcast, but I don't need to tell anybody. We live in a turbulent time in our country and the world, and there are plenty of things to be concerned about. So my question is, what is the role of lighthouses in our world today? What value do they have?
That is a great question, and I hear you whenever you say you try really hard not to get into politics, but I think the beauty of lighthouses is they can be a nonpartisan issue. They have a really unique role. They're beautiful architecturally. They naturally draw people to them. But on top of that, I think it's important to recognize a few things about lighthouses. A big thing, especially for us here in Erie, is that lighthouses support local tourism. You know, we're contributing to the revenue that's coming into the county by people visiting from out of state. A common reason why people visit our lighthouses in Pennsylvania is because they're visiting one of the state parks, because Pennsylvania has free state parks. So we receive funding from the many people that visit. You know, over 4 million people visit Presque Isle State Park every year. And if you think about those people spending the night, coming to visit a lighthouse, getting something to eat, that's a lot of revenue coming in. So a lot of revenue for your county, for your local government, for your state. That's a big thing. Lighthouses often help frame environmental challenges as they're man-made features in oftentimes a natural landscape. And, you know, we're located right on Lake Erie, but many lighthouses are literally out in the ocean or literally out in the lake and, you know, face anything from beach erosion to the elements. I think we have a unique ability to interpret that in a way that aligns with history, but also with the present, and helping people to understand that lighthouses do a little bit more than just shine in the night. Obviously, that's their main role, but they're there for a reason, and sharing that reason and framing that within a multitude of other reasons is important. And also, the NHLPA is a vital preservation act. And because of it, there are so many public-private partnerships out there that I think lighthouse organizations can often be a model for other historic sites. And lastly, I think lighthouse keepers were people. They were people with families, people with concerns, wants, needs. You know, we're using our lighthouse kitchen as an area to talk about connection to each other, to talk about connection to their environment, to talk about connection to other parts of the Great Lakes, to talk about isolation. And I think that's something that we all face as people, as a community, and as a country. So lighthouses really draw people in, and that's something that you'll discuss here in a minute with me.
6 years ago, as part of the first episode of this podcast, my co-host Cindy Johnson and I read a very interesting short essay about the meaning of light. We just read an excerpt back then, but today I'd like to read the whole thing. It's not all that long, and I'd like you to help me, Averie. It's an essay by the engineer Sri Priya Sundararajan. Please forgive me if you're listening and I pronounce your name completely wrong. But she kindly gave us permission for us to read her essay, which is entitled, "Let There Be Light."
Quote, "Since immemorial times, light has offered comfort and assurance, inspiration and guidance, and has shaped how human beings understand the world around them. The cultural myths of several nations center on a period of darkness dispelled by the generation of light in an uncanny parallel to the Big Bang Theory."
In the creation myth of Hinduism, primordial darkness gives way to the universe as we know it. In Greek mythology, Prometheus stole fire from the gods out of love for human beings, which allowed man to ward off danger and provide a means to sustain.
In the myths of the Inuit First Nations, the northern lights represent the souls of loved ones passed on, playing a celestial game of football while offering comfort and connection to those they left behind.
Universally, light provides a sense of connection between heaven and earth. Practically, the light of stars provided a means for navigators from the Hawaiian Islands in their outrigger canoes. The stars allowed Portuguese sailors who crisscrossed the globe in their caravels to venture bravely through the oceans of the world. In Neolithic cultures, such as those that lived on the Salisbury Plains of England, the alignment of the sun and the moon with stone built hinges marked the passage of time and allowed farmers to know when to sow and when to reap.
The availability of light at night has always been a mark of privilege, whether it was light from candles, dry and plentiful firewood, or electric-powered lights. This divide exists even today, with underprivileged populations unable to access the light, which in turn would light the way to education and the economic empowerment attendant with it. Here, harnessing the power of the sun by day allows for the illumination of populations by night through the development of innovative energy storage schemes.
Whether it is the simple splendor of a rainbow against storm clouds or the marvels of manufacturing nanoparticles within a living cell using light, light touches our bodies and empowers our souls. Unquote. So that's the end of the essay. The bottom line is that light is one of the essential components of life on this planet with all kinds of positive connotations. And it could be said that lighthouses were built to help people by sharing their light, which I think is a very powerful thing.
I think so too, and it brings me to a time back in the fall, which I hope you don't mind me talking about, Jeremy.
Not at all. Please do.
Great. We had a evening fall fest where we had a tarot reader and a Reiki master come visit the lighthouse, and he also did rune readings. And he didn't know who I was, so I came over and said I would like to participate in a rune reading. I've never done one of these before. So for those of you unfamiliar, it involves selecting a set of stones that have runes on them and selecting stones from within that collection and having the master kind of interpret them for you. So through the process, he's interpreting these stones and he looks at me and he says, "Do you know that you're the keeper of the light?" And me being the person I am said, "You're kidding, right?" Like, I'm the director of the lighthouse, that you're just being silly. And he goes, "Oh no, I didn't realize you were Averie. I didn't realize you were the director." So all of a sudden, I'm being told that I'm the keeper of the light. So I'm intrigued because he didn't know who I was. And I asked what that meant. And I think exactly what the essay is getting at is that positive connotation of sharing light with other people. And it just seemed funny and ironic that I was told I was the keeper of the light when I'm the director of a lighthouse organization. And my hope and my goal in my job, my role, is to provide my staff with the resources that they need to share these stories about our keepers, about our lighthouses, and making sure that I'm uplifting them, uplifting the visitor, uplifting the story in itself. So that hit me very deep. That's one of those moments that is kind of burned in my brain in a really positive way. So I think it aligns very well to your essay, Jeremy.
Well, I love that story, and you are very much the keeper of the light, both literally and figuratively. And if you don't mind me saying, I think all of our friends in the lighthouse preservation world, everybody who's involved at all with preserving lighthouses and their history, are keepers of the light. And as I've said many times, we are all on the same team.
Yes.
Thank you, Averie, for sharing that story.
To all the lighthouse keepers out there, all the people doing the preservation work, you are doing a wonderful job at bringing light to your communities and your visitors and your organization and the lighthouse themselves.
And also, thank you again, Averie, for co-hosting this episode. It's always a pleasure, and I look forward to doing it again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure. I've done quite a few podcasts with you already, but I think this one hits home in a lot of ways, and I think this one is really special. So thank you for letting me be a part of it.
One more thing I wanted to mention, the U.S. Lighthouse Society has some tours coming up. I'll be on 2 of them this year. For the month of June, most of the month of June, I'll be on the France tour, and in September, I'll be on the Cape Cod tour. The Cape Cod tour is sold out, but there's still room on the France tour and some of the other tours that are coming up. You can get more info at uslhs.org. We will be back in 2 weeks with a new episode featuring Florida Lighthouse historian Neil Hurley. Until then, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening, and
keep a good light.
All in my house, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.